Hey, it's Karina Reichman, and you are listening to Comes a Time with Oteil Burbridge and Mike Fenoya. If you're digging the podcast, do these guys a favor and review and subscribe. It means a lot. Be sure to follow the pod on social media, YouTube, and if you're joining for bonus episodes and exclusive content, go to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get on the bus. And now, here's Mike and Oteil.
What's up? Welcome back to another episode of Comes a Time podcast. That's Oteil.
And that's Mike. We got a real good one for you today. This one is actually a fan of the podcast who had written me and said, hey, I would really love to come on and tell you guys how deeply you've impacted my life. You know, he thinks he's seen every single podcast. He's like, I'm going to go back through and make sure there's not one I've missed, but I'm pretty sure I've watched every single one, you know, starting pandemic and all that. And the more I talked to him, the more I realized what a crazy life he had. He was basically homeless from the time he was like 13 because his parents split up. And then he went through all these trials and tribulations, ended up in the NFL got drafted, what he said was the St. Louis Rams right after they won the Super Bowl.
The Rams, yeah.
And I couldn't remember the team because I always think of the old, you know, Stone Age. I think it was the LA Rams, right?
Yeah, they're back there
St.
now.
Louis Cardinals, right? But it was the St. Louis Rams. Then he got severely injured, could not play anymore. Now he's got to put his whole life back together. He's got all this brain injuries, like he said.
He gets into it.
All the way pressed up against
Yeah.
the skull. There's no and they said if you had done one more game, you'd be dead or at best a vegetable. Then he's got to put his whole life back together. He meets Deepak Chopra, who helps him like fix his brain through meditation. He starts this other business that he's a very successful businessman. And then, but through the podcast, he like ended up becoming a business partner with Paul Stamets. He's like really good friends with Victor Wooten. He starts playing in a band, like singing lead, which he wouldn't have had the courage to do unless he had read Victor Wooten's book. And like, it's all these things. So I just thought, man, this is going to be a great podcast. It's long, but his life before he ever gets to seeing our podcast is so crazy.
Yeah.
There's so many twists and turns in it.
Yeah.
And it's all about the magic and just, you know, he's
really interesting guy, great guy. You could tell he's just genuine and heartfelt right off the bat. And yeah, we might even split this into a two-parter. It's so good, and we'll have him back for sure. And really can't thank him enough for coming on. So yeah, just so good. Went by so fast.
He's coming to the Sphere, and I can't wait to hang with him. And
yeah, it feels safer knowing he's there.
Yeah, man. He comes with many angel moments. Many moments of grace.
Sure.
Incredible series of synchronicities. It's really cool.
Super cool. Yeah, great episode. And thank you, Andrew, for hanging with us. And thank you guys all for hanging with us. As always, you can get more at patreon.com/comesatimepod and like, rate, review, subscribe, all that great stuff. And check out our solo dates at our respective websites, oteil.com, mikefenoya.com, and come see a live show. We will catch you all very shortly, and enjoy the podcast, everybody. Peace.
Just so I can get this out of the way, so I don't fan out on you guys, I really want to genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for the content you're putting out. I was watching it as entertainment, and with no intention, with no expectation, and all of a sudden, things in my life started really changing. And it's a direct impact for the content you guys put out. So not flattery, not fanning out, just a genuine, you know, friend to friend, man to man. Thank you to both of you guys, because as we explore this, hopefully you guys will see, like, it's been profound, and I hope that other people are picking up what you guys are dropping down. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a dream come true because you really do, you put yourself out here. I think God, with all we do is just like gab for an hour or more at a time, like once a week. Like, when am I going to say something really messed up that gets us canceled?
Yeah.
Or, or is this even helping? Or, so it's so great to have you on to hear actually how it helped. But I do want you to tell a little bit of your story for people that may not know you, because you have a super interesting life. The first way that I think we got in contact was you were going to help us get the guy that built that guitar for John Mayer.
Yeah.
Or that
Yeah.
ended
Bill
up,
Asher.
Yeah, the Garcia replica. And that was
Yeah.
through Danette Albetta.
No, I know Bill. He's a local musician. As a matter of fact, I'll pull up a funny picture for you guys if I can find it really quickly. But so during the pandemic, I had just seen Ben Harper's Rig Rundown, and he talked about a guy in there named Billy Asher, who I didn't really know at all. So can you guys see this, by the way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
That's me wearing the exact same hat, mind you.
That's okay. Once you find one that fits your head,
this is John's guitar. This is number one.
Wow.
So it's COVID. My son was really getting into mountain biking. So he saved up a bunch of money, and we basically split the bike. So I'm standing in line, and I see a guy with a lap steel t-shirt. I just strike a conversation with him. Well, it's Bill Asher. And we just start chatting, and probably about 3 weeks later, he came over to my house, and just to like hang, and I had this big piece of redwood that he wanted to check out that he's now turning into guitars, which is pretty awesome. But during the friendship, he called me. He said, "You're not going to believe this, but the Garcia estate and Doug Irwin have asked me to remake this guitar." And I mean, he put his heart and soul into it, and it is you've seen it.
I played with it. I mean, I've with John multiple that whole run, and it's
well, if you talk to John, so that number one was supposed to be mine.
Wow.
And John got his hands on it. He plays a little better than I do, so I'm cool with it. But that thing, I didn't feel worthy of it. I picked it up, and all I can say is it felt like holding Excalibur. Like it actually felt like it was Jerry. I mean, I felt the history in it. I felt the gravity. I felt like the action was perfect, and it was magical. So anyways, I met Bill in line at a bike shop, and have become friends with him. He's making me a guitar right now. And he made me another one that my buddy's son is a touring musician, like had to have. So I sold that to him. I don't want to say begrudgingly, but it was like letting a kid go.
Kind of,
because it was my first good instrument. It was my first instrument where I go, okay, I get the difference now. Like this thing sometimes plays itself. So so that's the history with that guitar. And it was so fun watching John play it, man. And
man.
Yeah.
And hearing it, like the low end on that thing, you know how Jerry does those licks down, like, oh, wow, wow. And it just really barks. It's like, and when you do it on that guitar, you're like, yep, it's got that low end.
Yeah. Is John, so when you're talking, is that when he's going through the Mutron? Like when is that?
No, I mean, sometimes it'll just be like, it could be like, it could be any song. Because Jerry just like to lean into the low end quite frequently. I think it may be from bluegrass or country or whatever, but it's just the thing that he leans into on electric that really Telecaster players are the only ones that I know that like really go for that specifically.
Yeah, and, interesting.
It just has that bark down there,
Did John tell you anything? Because I've heard the original Wolf has high action, like it's almost set up like a banjo.
That makes sense because he was a banjo player.
Yeah.
And you get the feeling that he liked the strings to fight him back. Like they're not like sitting like mine. My action is high, but I'm a drummer. I like to, when I hit the head, it's like you got to have a little fight. And I just play percussively. And I'm imagining the action was higher. It might not have been as high as Jerry's was, but I'm imagining to get that tone, you have to have like whatever that size strings. certain amount of action, whatever.
Yeah, got it. I heard you. It was on the last podcast you guys did with that great historian of the dead, DJ, and you
Rob
mentioned when you
Leitstein.
first saw Jerry. Yeah, God, that was a great interview, man. Great podcast.
Thank you.
But you mentioned, you're like, oh, when I first saw Jerry play the banjo, you're like, whoa, he can play the banjo. And then you learned that it was his first instrument, and you said it's hard to play the banjo because it's so nuanced. So does the action help you get to some of that nuance? Like what?
Oh
How do
yeah,
you?
it's just everything about it is Martian. So it's just so different from a bass player.
Yeah.
So it's the finger picks, the lowest string is on top and not down. You know, it's just like the tuning's completely banana. The whole thing. There's a drum head. I mean, it's just like Mars, you know.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
was where he started, and because he was so into bluegrass and old country stuff, and and pedal steel, you could tell he was really good on that too. He
Yeah,
really
amazing.
went down the rabbit hole with it, But
Yeah.
me and Mike were talking yesterday about like being a beginner again and learning something new,
Yeah.
and that kind
Yeah.
of thing it's just fun. So I just threw it all out the window. It's like, hey, you're on Mars. Learn to
Yeah.
walk, breathe, and talk on Mars.
Yeah.
Right.
Play music on Mars. Here we are. It's completely new.
We were
But
kicking
tell people
around.
a little bit.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I want to go back further than that into your life,
Yeah.
into
Sure.
because I love the story that you sent me about when you were really young, and you kind of had like, if people have seen the movie The Blind Side, you kind of had like the reverse version of that. Can you tell people, tell everyone about that?
Sure. Yeah. You know, what's interesting is I was, I'll tell the story and I'll build this into it. But so I grew up in Los Angeles. My father was a pretty renowned wrestler, like traditional wrestler. I believe I'm 99% sure he only lost one match in college, which was in the national championship his freshman year, and then he went undefeated from there. So won a couple
Wow.
national championships. Yeah, he was a really spectacular athlete, and he was also a bit of a renaissance man. Like published 3 books, and he was very soulful. He was a very soulful, like he had a real like Ray Charles was on a lot. If he was listening to music, it was like Ray Charles or so. But he was also, God bless him. And I'll start off by saying this: I am closer with my parents now in their death than I was in my life, and I forgive them for everything. Like, so we're gonna probably touch on some things where you're like, they weren't great parents, and like by traditional standards, they weren't great parents. But I am where I am today because of the childhood I had. So like I've resolved all that stuff. This isn't a like poor me story. This is the rocky road, I guess, I took, and part of that rocky road was beautiful. There's flowers along the way of that rocky road, right? So long story short, I grew up in LA. Yeah, totally. My dad's part of the family were Holocaust survivors from Germany, for like sort of first generation, my grandfather and then my great grandfather. And my grandfather, my dad's side, was a really interesting guy. He's a surgeon, World War II surgeon, and then he came back from the war and realized he had zero empathy. So he started taking psychology classes and really taught at UCLA for years doctors how to be empathetic with patients and family, and to process what they were dealing with. So it was really cool. So he got me started on kind of a psychology track. And then my mom's side of the family came over here from Denmark for the gold rush. So we're like one of the OG families in the gold rush. We're the last family that can be buried at the state park in Northern California in Coloma. And we just buried my grandmother there last year at 97.
Whoa.
And basically, for those who know Coloma, there's the American River. And basically there's a mountain, everything sort of what I'd call north of the American River was our family's property, and everything south of it was just land people were gold mining. Our family donated that to the park. And by the way, they did great gold mining, but like none of that made it even to the end of that generation. It wasn't like we're like some gold barons, but it's amazing. It's amazing when you go there, you can feel like in your bones that, we put my grandmother, my grandfather, and my great grandmother, who I'm closest with of anyone, all those three are like I'm closest with. We put them in the river together, their ashes. And it was,
wow.
It was so beautiful. So anyways, I grew up in LA, sort of like normal middle class childhood, private school, and then my parents divorced. So I went from very sort of waspy private school to only white kid in an all black school in fourth grade. And luckily, I had a wrestling background, but it was really interesting. I saw the differences in the schools. And, you hear the term like thrown around, systemic racism, which I think everyone would agree that there's systemic racism in this world. But what I really saw was like systemic inequality, right? That was my first taste of like, wow, this is not what I had over there. And by the way, probably 5 to 7 fights a day, right? So you're not only like not at same education, but I mean, like you got to walk out to recess kind of ready, you know what I mean? And that, which anyway, so in fifth grade, I changed schools, and what was interesting about the fifth grade is I went to a school where it was probably 30% Persian Jews who were coming over from Iran from the Holocaust, and first generation Koreans. It was really interesting. And the Persian Jews, like there would be 2 families living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I would say kind of from the 5th grade on, I started raising myself. My parents were divorced. They were really checked out. Side note, my stepmother was like a beautiful 28-year-old blonde playmate. And she was cool to me, but like she was busy doing her own thing as a 28-year-old,
Right.
And started having kids too. So I started kind of raising myself in the 5th grade. Going to the reverse of the blind side, my dear friend to this day, Josh Davis, mother was white, lived in Kauai, father black, lived in LA, and I was at his house 4 days a week at least. Sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes for 2 weeks straight.
Wow.
And Mr. Charles raised both of us, and it was like a humble setting, but it was full of love. And his mother, Kay, Mike O'Teal and I connected over the weekend and talked about like these angels who visit our life. His mother, Kay, is an angel, and she passed, I want to say about 15 years ago now. I still keep a shrine to her and bring her flowers and pray to her. And she would always check in with me at the right times, not all the time, but at the right times. Right.
Yeah.
Grew up loving martial arts, music, the outdoors. My grandparents lived in Northern California on a couple acres of property. There were streams and rivers. That's where my heart was. My heart was in nature. And my heart was with them because I would go there and get wild, unconditional love, right? And direction. Like my grandfather was a Navy guy, and they were very into the arts. They were very into food, but 90% of what we ate came out of their garden.
Wow.
And if you were having cereal with my grandmother, they're a middle-class family, but if you're having cereal in the morning, there was a placemat and there were candles, and so she taught me how to really enjoy life. She taught me that you don't need a lot of money to enjoy life. You just need to put energy into. So we'd, during the summer, we'd eat, they had a couple acres. We'd eat, in the orchard, we'd eat, by the stream, we'd eat, and she'd make it a big production. So that was an amazing part of my childhood. Meanwhile, I'd come home and I was a street kid. I mean, have you guys read Flea's book?
Yep. Ask for the children. It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could have an hour talking about that book, but a lot of what he was talking about, minus like the hardcore drugs, I was in those scenes. I was on Fairfax. I was, they were the older kid. I was the younger kid. So I grew up. If you read that book, it wasn't dissimilar. He had a bit more trauma at home, but anyways, that's what it was. I was, basically a street kid, and just sort of a seed I'm planting as a theme for this show is like manifestation. So one thing my dad did say when I was like in the 4th grade is he looked at my brother and he said, "You're going to be a top litigator, and Andrew, you're going to play strong guard in the NFL." And he said that often.
Extremely specific.
Extremely specific.
Yeah, he had
strong guard.
Your position picked out.
Strong guard. Yeah.
And he knew my brother was going to be. Yeah, and he knew my brother was going to be a litigator. And fast forward, my brother's one of the top litigators in the country. He's arguing in front of the Supreme Court. Has helped like Obama write bills. He's one of the top attorneys, and I played strong guard and center in the NFL. So on the manifestation scene, like that was implanted in my head early, and I really believed it.
And what year was that when you were in the NFL? Because you got drafted whatever team it was. That was right after they won the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, I got drafted in 2000, and the St. Louis Rams at the time, the Rams were in St. Louis. They had just won the Super Bowl, so you get drafted a couple months later, and now all of a sudden I show up and like all my heroes are around. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So technically, I was on the team from 2000 to 2003. I had a lot of injuries that ended my career, concussions that we'll probably get into in a little bit. But yeah, so I was there from 2000 to 2003. And what I'll say about the Rams is they still treat me to this day like I'm Marshall Faulk or Kurt Warner. Like they
Really?
Oh, wow.
yeah. Not every team. A lot of teams, that bus is moving so fast, man.
Yeah.
That train, I'll call it a train. That train is moving so fast that to be on it is a life's work. And then once you get off of it, it's gone. So a lot of the teams, when you're gone, they don't even think about you. But like the Rams, they've got an amazing CEO, Mr. Kroenke, the owner. They take good care of the old guys. So I still feel very much part of the team. I go to games. I go to practices. Great. Yeah, it's awesome.
That's
awesome.
Really
awesome. That's good to hear.
So when you had these injuries, you went through a lot of like trauma, right?
Yeah.
Going through.
Oh yeah.
Trying to get your head together. What am I going to do now?
Yeah. Yeah, that was.
Where'd you go from there?
Well, I haven't answered your original question yet. So let me answer that real quick and then I'll go there. So long story short, about halfway through the 8th grade, I moved out. I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. My dad, believe it or not, was part of the group that like managed NWA and that whole crew.
Get out of here.
And Suge Knight was like a bodyguard. I mean, I can tell you want to hear some Suge Knight stories. I'll tell you some Suge. And Suge,
also,
by the way,
what is that guy you said when you were watching the podcast with Jesus and Tommy Coombs? You were like, yeah, what's his name? You were there for that, but something happened to somebody.
Yeah. So the DOC, who sort of invented modern day rap, where it became way more rhythmic instead of like, which I love, by the way. He was the one that like really accentuated, almost played bass, right? Where like the bass matches so he was in my dad's car one night and he was the best of everybody. Everyone would tell you he was the best. Everyone loved him. And he got in a car accident and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt and his neck hit hit the steering wheel and that was it. And here's the thing that I've heard. I mean, I'm not there, so I don't know, but I heard they all took really good care of him. Like he's still making records, he's still producing. So even though we lost him as an artist, like he's still behind the scenes making art, which is awesome because he was incredible.
Yeah, man.
So anyways, I'll do this quickly. Life was such. I just go, I'm out of here. And fortunately for Josh, he moved to Hawaii. My buddy Josh and his dad, Mr. Charles, moved to Hawaii, so he was gone. And I kind of couch surfed for a little while. And then in the 9th grade, my brother and I had an apartment and we lived in this little 1-bedroom apartment. And just to back up a step, that summer before 9th grade, I was a really like a street kid to the nth degree. That doesn't mean I'm like doing crazy drugs and breaking a bunch of laws. It just means like we were in the streets all the time and we would go anywhere and do anything we wanted to do. And one night I was at Century. Oh, you asked a question?
I just would like to get an idea for like around what year this is, just because I'm trying to follow.
Yeah. 89, 90.
Okay.
Or like
so
90,
how old are you
91?
right now?
Yeah. I'm like 13.
How old are you in real life?
I'm 47.
Okay,
3 years
cool.
older
Gotcha.
than you.
Right
3
on,
years
sweet.
older than you, Mike.
Thank you. All right. Now I'm kind of like, all right, I get it. Because I'm thinking, are you like street life without a phone, street life like Tony Hawk? Like, I get it.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, cool. Gotcha. All right.
Yeah, so I was at Century City Mall, and there, believe it or not, like in LA, at the time there were all these crews, and the gang scene was really prevalent. And I said the wrong thing to the wrong guy, leader of a gang, and I'm sitting, and then long story short, I get beat up by these two guys, and I mean beat up, like level 10 beat up.
Wow.
And from that moment on, I go, okay. I remember going to my friend's house that night, couch surfing, going like, all right, that's it. Street life is over. I'm going to focus on football. This is it. And I didn't know what to do, but I just started jogging and doing push-ups. And a week later, I reported to camp. And I was, so that week later, I went back and actually lived with my mom, who I hadn't seen in years. And she was in a relationship that was a really tough relationship, where I couldn't be in that environment. I'd had a lot of troubles with this guy throughout my life, and I couldn't be in that environment. So for like the couple days that I was there, I just said, "Hey, listen, I'm good. I'm gonna get a college scholarship. I'm gonna play in the NFL. You take care of yourself. I know you got a lot of, like, you got to do a lot to take care of. You take care of yourself. I'm gonna be good. You just don't need to worry about me." That night, her boyfriend at the time got heated with her, and as a 13-year-old, I threw him out of the house, and he was a grown man.
Wow.
And I gave him a warning where he didn't go back to the house for years. Something in me, I found something in me that night that I could summons, that he heard. And I'm not saying that as macho. I'm saying that as, like, my mom was in trouble. I needed to protect her, and I found a gear I didn't know I had. Right.
Well, what did your dad say you were going to be? What was the name of the position?
Strong guard. Yeah.
Strong guard.
Strong guard.
So didn't necessarily say it was always going to be on the football field, right?
Yeah. Well said, man.
Yeah.
Well, you do find that, like, if it's your mom, there's something so deep.
Yeah.
Your child, you may not even know that person's there, but guess what?
Yeah,
they come roaring out. Yeah,
they
13,
came roaring, exactly.
Schmerteen. It's like, you're gonna die, dude, if you come back here.
Yeah, totally. So fast forward, I'll get back to your question about the concussions. Fast forward, high school was amazing. I lived with my brother that freshman year. Sophomore, I lived with the Monkarsh family, who took such great care of me for half the year. The second half of the year, I lived with one of my coaches. By the way, my sophomore year, my high school football coach, Carter Pasinger, who I'm still very close with to this day, he found out what my situation was. And this is a strong Black man from South Central. And by the way, I'm at Beverly Hills High School. Right? I'm at Beverly Hills High School, like, no clean clothes, no meal, like, nowhere knowing where my meal was coming. At this point, I ended up getting a job later and figured out how to make money. But he called me into his office. He's like, "Hey, Andrew, I heard about your situation. You're going to be fine. The only thing I'm telling you is you're not a victim. We are not going to get in. So you don't need to tell anyone about your situation," which I hadn't at the time, because I was living alone. I didn't want the school to find out about it, like, make an issue of it. So, but he said, "I found out what's happening. My office is always open." And he became like not like a hovering, micromanaging dad. He became the person I needed, right? Which was, I needed him to be my coach. And when I needed extra stuff, he was there for it. But the biggest lesson is that you're not a victim. And he was a big fan of Martin Luther King. And it was always where a man stands. Like, you're going to be judged where a man stands, right? Yeah. So fast forward, had a great high school football career. There was only a couple colleges, because at the time, my position, offensive line, the archetype for that was like, you had to be 6'6", 320 pounds. And I'm like a 6'3" guy from Beverly Hills High School, which doesn't get the cred that some of the other schools got, right? So, but
what did you weigh at that point?
So I was probably about 300 pounds at that point. I'm for context, I'm like 210, 215 now on any given day.
Yeah. Because I see and I don't see linemen. I don't see like college linemen.
Yeah. I was this big as an 8th grader.
Got it.
Right. My sophomore year, I was 235. My freshman year was 235. My sophomore year was 265. Junior year, 275 to 285. Senior year, 300.
Jeez.
I can put on. Yeah. If you want to see a comedy special, Mike, I got married. We had a 21-day honeymoon. I was 215 pounds when I got married. I was 241 days, 21 days later, because of the diet that I was on. So you see, like, the incredible.
Yeah.
Like, I went from like in shape and chiseled to like man boobs and love handles and inflammation, and it was a bad deal. So love hurts. Love hurts. So I even though in my brain I still believed I was going to play in the NFL, my grandfather was a Navy guy, and I was always a dream of mine to join the Navy. And so San Diego State was recruiting me. My dad lived in San Diego at the time. I'd sort of like built a friendship back up with him. Um, I drove the day after I graduated high school, like no joking about this. I drove to San Diego and went to basic underwater demolition school, which is in Coronado, California. And I knocked on the door and I said, "Hey, look, I'm signed a scholarship to play at San Diego State, but I want to train with you guys because when I get done with football, I want to come be a SEAL." And they're like, "Great." They gave me like a 4-hour tour. And from that day on, I was very close with uh, the guys who ran Buds, basic underwater demolition school, so much so that we would cross train together.
Wow.
And to this day, there's a relationship there.
Wow.
And so, and we're knucklehead. So fast forward 2 years later, we're knucklehead, football players and bunch of knucklehead SEALs in San Diego.
You know what I hear you doing though? Like when you go to San Diego and like, you go to play football, but you also set this foundation at the Navy school where it's like, through experience that you need to have like not a fallback, but like a foundation, like a father, if
foundation,
you will.
yeah.
Like you basically said, like, "Hey, I'm here to go to college and play football, but my grandfather was in the Navy and you guys are here and I want to be here with you." Like you basically, like you said, you learn to take care of yourself at an early age. So like you go to a new place and not just go like, "Okay, I'm a college kid." You didn't have the luxury to just be a college kid playing football.
Yeah.
You have had to be a grown up since you were in 4th grade. So you went and set up a fail safe, a backup plan, something that like what's more of a fallback than Navy SEAL? Like I don't know, it's just perfect.
Yeah.
Like what a great like that's you being like subconsciously your own parent,
Yeah.
Like you put in like like a savings account for yourself,
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's well said. I don't think I was that conscious and mindful of it, but that's exactly what I did.
But that's what was happening.
One thing that I've always done is things are binary for me. I am passionate and I love it and I'm all in, or it don't even bother.
Yeah. Amen to that.
That was one of those things where I didn't see being a SEAL much different than being an offensive lineman, which I now don't see much different from being in a band, because it's all about chemistry, nonverbal communication, training. When you have that microsecond to in the SEAL world, it's called violence of action. Like the second it opens up in our sport, like the second a D lineman gave me a window, I had to, it's more like a keto.
Right.
And in music, it's like create space. All right, I'm feeling something, let me go. But like all of those things are nonverbal communication things where you got to all have such good chemistry for it to work. And
even telepathy, maybe.
Yeah.
Crowd work.
Totally.
Yeah.
I played football, Teal, with a guy named Rick Austin that I never went out to a bar with, never had a meal with, never went out for a night on the town with, nothing, but we were telepathic.
Yeah.
And to this day, Big Rick, when I think about him, it's like, it's just nothing but beautiful. And I know he feels the same way about me. And, I played on the line with some of my best friends. I didn't have that chemistry, Rick, but like Big Rick and I had a mission. We knew the mission. It was unspoken. And most important, I would break both legs to save him from spraining an ankle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same thing with me. There were so many times I was getting beat and Big Rick put a hand out, or his guy went away and he clobbered my guy and vice versa. So,
Yeah. There's a certain level of like, and I've never, for those listeners, I've never met you before we came on here today, man. And the thing that I really love about everything that you've been saying, and the thing that I'm getting a lot from you, is like gratitude, and also just like making sure that you give props to the people who are real and genuine and took care of you and you took care of them. And like your story up to this point has heroes throughout the journey, right? And it's clearly very important to you to show gratitude for the people who rose up and filled the potholes where you could have very easily fell and blamed someone else and stuff like that. And I mean, when you have those kind of like cautionary tales as parents, or maybe learn what not to do is just as important
Yeah.
as learning what to do. That
Yep.
gratitude comes a long way, and you really value the relationships and the just genuine friendships where it's like, oh, I can trust you. Oh, I can,
Yeah.
like, you have my back. And that's a
Yeah.
really, really important thing that I don't think it's a blessing and a curse when you
Yeah.
have those parents that are kind of maybe whatever, learning how to
Yeah.
do it. But
Yeah.
when you have to become your own adult, that bullshit filter gets turned
Yeah.
on high and never shuts off. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate this. Like, just wanted to give
Yeah.
you
Totally.
that, like, kind of
Well,
like,
thank you. It means a lot, and it's genuine. And just how you talk about David Tell from time to time, how he's sort of like, hey man, come for the hang. Here's the mic. Let's, you know, when you're giving him gratitude, um, it's so genuine, because if he didn't give you that chance, you don't know for sure where you'd be, but you knew what that chance did for you, and you knew it came from an amazing place. And so,
yeah,
so you get it. I mean,
totally, dude.
we are
Totally.
fortunate to have, some people who are like temporary angels and some people who are like long-term
Yeah.
angels, but why not thank them? And when I have a chance to do that for other people, I'm
Yeah.
always jumping at it,
That's the
Yeah.
whole, see, to me, that's what religion should be.
Yeah.
An angel literally came right when you needed it in
Yep.
human form, and out of the goodness of just their own goodness, just saved you or
Yeah.
gave you exactly what you needed. You're in the hole already.
Yep.
And they go, and then here comes a line down like, yo, bro, I
Yeah.
see you. It's like, yeah, we're going to give that. So now you got to be that too. I mean, what a great
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure
Yeah.
you're a
Yeah.
great dad.
Yeah. I am, man. I love those kids. We
You
have
know?
fun. I'm present. I mean, I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect,
Yeah,
right?
me neither.
But I'm all in. And if those kids are going to get anything from me, it's going to be, unconditional, endless love. And,
Yeah, man.
so no, I
Well,
mean,
let's
my,
move forward a little bit to when you're
cool.
sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah, no worries, man.
I know it's a lot of setups, but I want to move to the point where you're like really struggling. Now you've gone through the injuries, your brain, you've had, I'm guessing, the CTE, right? Like just
Yeah.
full on.
Yeah.
And how you
So,
get yourself up out of that hole, and also like not being able to play anymore.
yeah.
Like that
Well, that was
whole,
gnarly. That was the worst. That was one of the worst points in my life. At the time, it was by far the worst point of my life. But so I got to the Rams, and um, I'll never forget it. Like, I check in to the first day of camp, which is only a couple weeks after you get drafted, and a couple months after they'd won the Super Bowl. And I go into the restroom, and I'm at the urinal, like just sort of having a talk to myself. And to my right, I hear somebody go, "Hey, man, you ready for this?" And it was Kurt Warner. And
What?
I look at him, I go, yeah, I am. I'm ready for this. He's like,
Nice.
good. And he said, good. And Kurt was a man of few words. Talk about an angel, OTL.
mm,
There, you can watch a movie on him, it doesn't do any justice.
uh,
I'll tell some Kurt stories, but first of all, one of the greatest, quarterbacks of all time. And the Isaac Bruce Kurt Warner connection is, I don't know that you'll ever be able to recreate that, but what an amazing guy. So long story short, in college, I was a bruiser. I set the record 2 years in a row for the most pancake blocks, which is where you light somebody up. There's a good pancake block online if anyone wants to check it out on YouTube. It says like Andrew Kline, great football hit. That's
Yeah.
who I was in college.
I'm gonna look at.
It's
Yeah,
fun to watch.
the jump from high school to college was really difficult. It was a physical jump. You're like a boy, and you're
Yeah.
playing with guys that are 5 years older than you that are straight up and down men, right?
Mm,
The
Big.
jump to the NFL was a speed jump and a cerebral jump. And it's interesting because a lot of people hear football players interviewed and you think they're dumb. There is nobody dumb playing football.
right.
It's 3D chess. There are a
Yeah.
million plays you got to memorize. There's a million nuances. So when I got there, I really focused on becoming a student of the game. I'd never been a student of the game. I'd been a student of technique and I'd been a bruiser, but I'd never been a student of the game. So I got there, and from the moment I got up, I was either studying or working out from 6 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night. There's like weekends and stuff where Friday night you're going to go out, but Saturday you're back training again. So I train, and this might sound weird, but I was playing by far the best football of my life by a long shot when I got to the NFL. I was in the right system. I was on the right line. I had the right coaches, and the mental training really helped me because it made me a step quicker. And the coaches, and Mike Martz, who was our head coach at the time, was, so I'll give you an example. I get to our college team had a package. So it was like 20 pass plays, 20 run plays, blah, blah, blah. We get to the Rams, and on day one, we installed my college package. And I was like,
Perfect.
this is amazing.
Yeah.
I was like, I know all this. I'm going to crush it. Well, day two, they installed an entire new package.
Yeah.
And we did that for 12 straight days. So I had 12 to 20 times the amount of plays and work to do. It was crazy.
It's like sucking on a fire hydrant.
It was sucking on a fire hydrant, man. And, look, I mean, I hate giving analogies, but, you go learn the Grateful Dead's catalog, right? That's a lot of stuff to learn. Imagine if they fired on like 12 other catalogs. That's the exact, It was crazy. So I did a lot of studying and was playing the best football of my life. And in time, one of our guards, I was playing strong guard and quick guard. One of our guards went down, and because I knew the plays as well as the starting center and better than anyone else, and I knew all the center plays, they moved me to center. And then
wow.
And there was a guard. So I found, all of a sudden I'm starting for the Rams and hiking to Kurt Warner. And
jeez.
If you guys want two great football stories about what it's like, playing in that league, I'm happy to tell you them. That are my favorite stories. But fast forward, we're playing we're actually in practice, and I take a guy down, and I get I can still remember it vividly. I get knee in the back of my head, and I remember going, oh wow, that was a bad concussion. And then kind of blacking out. And then I didn't walk back to the huddle. I walked back to where all the other players were standing. And there's a guy that I played with in college named Oz Hakeem. I walked up to him and I started talking to him about what we were going to do that night at San Diego State.
Wow.
And I just remember him going medic. And then I passed out and then I woke up in a CAT scan machine.
Whoa,
man.
Just like that. Boom.
And let me tell you, man, when you're 300, I was 330 pounds at this time. When you're 330 pounds on one of those CAT scan machines, it's like a New York hot dog that's been steamed. You know what I mean?
It's awful. I'm not that big, and I hate those. Yeah. I just had to do one for
Me too, man.
Yeah.
It's
I also want to say this. I'm going to preface it with this. We knew the damage that was happening to our heads. You can't go through one practice without getting stars and stuff. So even though at the time our collective bargaining agreement at the time really limited play if you got a concussion, it wasn't being enforced. Like the NFLPA was not enforcing that. It just wasn't even a thing. So I get injured, and I finally check out of the hospital that night, and I'm back in my room, and I just remember like being depressed, going, I just earned this starting spot. Now I'm injured. And I get back to, the training room. I walk in the training room the next day knowing that I wasn't going to practice. And there's this old crusty doctor, and he looks at me and he's like, all right, man, you're good. I'll see you in a week. And I'm like, and because you're on that train and it's moving, there's a lot of pressure,
of course,
to play. The team needed me, and I just kept playing. I just kept getting concussions. And I remember, we were playing the Tennessee Titans in a preseason game, and I took all the reps for the first string and the second string, which is really pressing it. And I remember in that game, I don't know if Mike, you might remember the name Javon Curse.
Yeah, of course. I love football, so yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So he wasn't that big of a guy. He was just wildly fast. He was like one of the first track star DNs.
Right.
So we're playing against him, and
he was like an Ed Reed.
I mean, he was a machine, man.
Yeah.
And I'm pulling around on a counter, and he nails me in the head, and I just remember like whack, like it went through my toes. And so long story short, I've been told I had 15 documented concussions. And to wrap this up, I'll try to make my stories less long, by the way, moving on, so we can actually get through this podcast. But we're going out to play the Raiders on a I think it was a Monday night game, and I I was known as one of the smartest players on the team that knew this playbook well. And I went from that to when they would call the play in the huddle, not only not remembering the play by the time I got the line of scrimmage, but not remembering the snap count. So I had a
Wow.
background in meditating all through college. I meditated and did visualization all through college. So I called our team psychologist to meditate before this game. And thank God, he called the neurologist. So I'm ready. I'm about to go out and play the Raiders, like the team I grew up loving.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a tap on my shoulder, and they told me I needed to see the neurologist. So the neurologist looks at me and he just said immediately, "This guy's not playing."
Wow.
He could see my eye. One of my eyes was like a pin and the other was like this, my pupils.
Jesus.
So I get out of
Boy.
10 hours of brain scans the next day, and the doctor looks at me and he goes, listen to me. If you had played last night, you'd be dead right now.
Oh,
He said my brain was touching my skull. There was no room. There's a lot of fluid in your brain, and there's a lot of space between your brain and your skull.
Sure.
He said, your brain is stuck to your skull. And he goes, at best, and I go, really dead? He goes, at best, a vegetable. He goes, you needed one hit and you were done. So that was it, man. That was it. And, I remember, and I remember very little for the next year. I remember very little.
Whoa.
But there are some windows. Yeah, there's some windows that I'll wrap this up by saying, I went in and met with my coaches, and it was all tears, man, because they knew how much I cared about it. They knew what a future I had. And there were older players that were crying because I was their little protege.
Yeah.
And they knew the potential that was like, and more important, that passion. Like they knew that, they knew that I wanted this. But what's amazing, man, is I was in my room packing my shit up, excuse my language, packing my stuff up, getting ready to leave. And Kurt Warner knocks on my door. And this is in his heyday. Like,
jeez,
he didn't have a microsecond to spare.
Right.
And he takes me on a little drive and just says, look, man, like, God's got different plans for you. I'll be praying for you. And it wasn't that melodramatic. It was just a moment of grace from a really amazing human. And he dropped me off and at the training facility where I had to go do some stuff. And that was that, and still to this day, I'll run into him and he's like, even 100 pounds lighter, he knows exactly who I am and gives me a big hug and stuff. But yeah, that was it. I'll spare you the details, but for a year, I didn't make a memory. I would talk to my girlfriend for 3 hours, my girlfriend at the time. I'd hang up the phone and call her back 5 seconds later. And so that was the next year of my life. It was really intense. Yeah,
That's
it was really
traumatic.
intense.
Brain
That's
injury.
terrifying.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. Yeah. It not to any of the extent that you went through, but I fractured my humerus bone snowboarding, and I had to have a plate and 8 screws put in, and I was taking Vicodin and Xanax, and I would have hours-long conversations with people and hang up the phone and then immediately call them right back. Like I never talked to them. And they were like, I remember my buddy Justin being like, dude, we just talked. And he's I'm like, come on, dude, what's it been, like weeks?
Yeah.
And then like one of my friends called my parents and were like, yo, take the phone away from him and make sure he's okay. And I realized I was kind of just like, I don't know if I whacked my head when I fell, but I think it was the pills, and I had to stop taking that. That was like the warning sign. But man, that was just for a week. I couldn't even imagine a year of that. Like that was just, God, man.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure there's a lot of depression that came along with that too, Andrew, right? Like, just major emotional, psychological.
And I'm not a depressed person. It was insane. So from a physical perspective, you can't go in light. You can't hear noise. Like if you're in a restaurant and somebody moves a seat on a wooden floor, like it's an entire chalk body thing. So you just become a recluse. And it's so embarrassing because, I'd see my buddies that day and then like connect with them later and they'd be like, what'd you guys do today? They're like, hey man, we went to the driving range today. And they got it. They got it. But forget about that. And that's not saying it was nothing, because it was something, but your career's gone.
Yeah.
Your identity's gone.
What are you going to do now?
Your strength,
your net, everything. And Mike, you've got me down the rabbit hole of comedy. So I was listening to Chappelle on Rogan, Joe Rogan. And he said on Rogan, if I didn't have comedy, I would die.
Yeah.
And the reality is every football player feels the same way. And but
Sure.
the difference is like there's everyone ends their football career, right? Where Chappelle hopefully will be cracking jokes until
You could
Yeah,
sit in a
like
recliner and
Matrix.
do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Right,
yeah,
right. But football's, I
yeah,
mean,
It's short. Fighters too. It's short. You know it's
yeah,
short going
totally,
in.
well,
totally.
so and I hope you're going in this direction with your story, but I want to know like that year of not having a memory, what about the, January 1st of the next year? Like how are you
Yeah,
now? And have you just been on a quest to kind of like rebuild?
yeah. To this day, it's nonstop. It's a daily thing. I don't drink. Um, there's a lot of things that I do to make sure my brain is optimized. But what I'll tell you is this. Um, when I got injured, the doctors, so there was this, I had a neurologist that I met with whose name I will spare, but there was actually two neurologists who I met with. And um, this one neurologist was like making fun of me. I'm like, I can't remember anything. He's like, you're fine. And I'm getting all these anxiety attacks. He's like, you're fine. I'd never had anxiety attacks,
What?
but with the neurology changing, I would have 20 panic attacks a day. I was in the hospital on average of once a week for an entire year,
Ugh.
emergency room, because I thought I was dying.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
right.
Jeez.
They're like,
And the
Andrew's
doctors
back.
kept, yeah, totally. No, and they did. They did. They wouldn't even
Yeah.
charge me. They'd just be like, let's just wait here. They wouldn't even check me in.
Yeah.
The hospital was a couple blocks from my house. They'd calm me down. They were,
Wow.
God bless nurses, Mike.
More
You
angels.
know, or angel, yeah.
Yeah.
But so crazy enough, these doctors, these neurologists are trying to push Aricept, which is uh, medicine that people use for Alzheimer's, and Prozac. And something just said, these aren't good people. These doctors aren't good doctors, and they weren't.
Yeah.
Right? They were not. If I told you stories, they were not good doctors. They were not there for my care. So don't trust what they're telling you. And I didn't take it. And lo and behold, in that time, I lived in San Diego. Deepak Chopra, who I didn't know who he was,
Mm.
had a center that a friend of mine worked at. And she invited me to meet Deepak. And I'd been meditating for 4 years in college already. My college football coach, Damon Baldwin, um, who really made me the player that I was, he and Ed White, had me meditating. But I meet Deepak, and Deepak is a neurologist.
Ah,
And
perfect.
Deepak teaches me to heal my brain through meditation. And
Wow.
it starts working. It starts working. And over the and I will tell you guys this. I never contemplated suicide. I never envisioned it. I never thought I would do it. But there were nights where I would lie in bed. There's one night specific I was lying in bed and I had like my 12th anxiety attack for the day. I don't have a job. My life is in chaos. And I remember saying to myself, okay, I'm not going to kill myself, but I certainly can't live like this. Like
Yeah.
this is not sustainable.
Exhaustion.
Yeah.
Exhaustion.
Yeah.
You've talked about it, Mike. There's that one episode where you got real vulnerable. I picked up on a lot what you were saying. I lived that. And
Yeah.
so I really felt that episode. But
Yeah.
long story short, he taught me to heal, man. I still to this day meditate and
Good.
every single day. And there was a night where I had a dream where I was in a car accident and I died, and I watched my body float above the car that I was in, and I woke up and I said, all right, it's time to heal. And that was the turning point where
Wow.
things started really coming back. And thank God, I'm now,
Wow.
you take a basically a really robust IQ test when you get in the NFL, and I've basically gotten myself back to there. But
Wow.
Nice.
yeah.
How
But it's
great.
been a journey. It's been a
Of
journey. Yeah.
course. And it
Yeah.
still will be. Because
Yeah.
while all that's happening, you're also aging. Like it's the thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're naturally kind of like having
Totally.
more miles being put on the odometer, you know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
good for
Totally.
you for not like pouring whiskey in the gas tank,
Yeah.
instead,
Yeah. Yeah.
instead you put a new air system and a new
Yeah.
computer and wow, man, good for you. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just
No, I mean,
amazing.
and
What a journey.
Dude, if I could just like, if we could talk about this for a moment, man, that exhaustion that we've both discussed kind of, and embraced as like, I don't want to kill myself, but living is so hard and so tiring.
yeah.
People don't understand that those seconds turn into hours, those minutes feel like years. And it's like when you're in the throes of it and everything's going wrong, you feel like, and
Yeah.
it's like you don't see the other end of that tunnel.
It
Yeah.
feels like
The amount,
eternity.
the amount of
Yep.
like the dust circling you, and it almost is like you can't take a thought. I'm trying to put into words how frustrating it is
Yeah.
to have that like inability to focus. That is one of the most
Yeah.
overlooked, I think, like
Yeah.
side effects or symptoms of depression and anxiety is this inability to like really wrangle a thought and
Yeah.
like get your shit together, as people may say. Like it's almost impossible
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
in, right? I mean, you're just,
Feels
and
100%. Yeah.
that's where the complete
Yeah.
exhaustion comes from. Cause it's like your brain's running at a
Yeah.
faster speed than ever, but nothing's getting done.
Yeah. And it's just doing this.
Yeah.
It's just
It's
spinning
just
out.
right. And there's just no energy. All the
No.
energy is sucked up by the. So I have a question for you, Mike. So
Mhm.
I would say it was a year of torture, but there were only a couple moments of despair. And when I hit those moments of despair, it was really jolting. It was really shocking. I I can't read your mind, but my interpretation when we did when there was the full podcast on what you were going through was that there was a lot of prolonged despair. Was that accurate? And
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
yeah
But my like my situation was a little different in the sense of it was kind of like there was that pre-existing anxiety and panic that I did a lot of work to kind of like mitigate. And
yeah
then the scale just tipped and it was real experiences that made it happen, but it just turned into just like I was like drowning in that, in
yeah
despair, in worthlessness, in like just questioning my beliefs in people and in life,
And
and
everything.
kind of having to really, I think the word that would make the most sense would be surrender, where I just was like, what the hell am I holding on to? Like literally what, and I remember it during a ketamine treatment session, where I kind of had that like I would parallel it to that dream you had of the car accident,
mm-hmm.
you know,
Crossroads.
where I remember there being this like experience where I was in a, you know, I hate calling them trips because it makes it sound like it was like a
yeah
in
Not
a
real.
in a session
yeah
where
Yeah.
basically like all of these things are happening, but your fight or flight is turned off. So you kind of have to like go through the experience as you had to go through that dream. Like you can't make yourself wake up. So
yeah
you're kind of in it and you're going through it. And I remember just going like, what am I holding on to? Like it's up to me to let go of it,
yeah
right? And it's up to me to let go of the despair. It's up to me to let go of the sadness. It's up to me to let go of the anxiety and the experiences that I've had and the trauma and the, you know, disappointment and the hurt. I'm the one holding on to it, right?
yeah
So I could be the one to let go of it. And I think that moment was my kind of car accident dream moment where it was like, yeah, it's up to me to change this because no one else is going to.
yeah
And that was the when I finally saw that there was a light coming at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't the end of the journey by any
yeah
stretch, but it
yeah
was like,
Yeah.
keep going. Don't give up
Yeah.
because there is
yeah
an end to this tunnel. It's just going to take a little bit more work. And that's when I at least had like the moment of like, keep this, don't keep that, you know,
yeah
like keep this, like forgive this, but don't let that
yeah
hold you back anymore. And it was this kind of like crawling through the rubble to get out of the, you know,
was that in a ketamine? I know you mentioned ketamine. Was that sort of epiphany in a ketamine journey, or was
yeah,
it?
yeah,
See, that's the thing about psychedelics, man, is like you could do 10 years of therapy and not get where you got. But if you have the right facilitator and you have the right, if you read Journey to Itzlan before you do it, like, I mean,
yeah,
if you
Yeah.
if you have the right set and setting, I think you can wrap 10 years of
dude.
of treatment into one session. I mean,
I'll
like,
tell you a
I have
hundred.
some stories for you about friends. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, no, please. I'm so, it's just, yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. And I'll tell you, sometimes it's not even, I did a ketamine, intramuscular ketamine session recently where it's like it's not the IV, but it's just like a shot in the arm.
Mhm.
And it comes on a little stronger and it's a little more whatever. But I'll tell you this, man, this was a little different than the way that I was doing the ketamine treatment because that was way more clinical and this was way more like you know, I'm in a bed with blankets and an
Yep.
eye mask and music, and there's two women sitting there. And I'll tell you what, like at one point, I just put my hand out and they knew just hold his hand. And that was more powerful than 5 years of therapy. Just
Yeah.
knowing that, like,
Right.
in this moment when my eyes
It's
were
safe.
closed and my
Yeah.
hand went out, someone knew to just
Yeah.
Right.
hold it. And that
Yep.
right there was like, I mean, just tears pour. And it, what,
Yeah.
no
That's the
words,
angel
no
moment again.
words. Yep.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I just like, at the end of it, I kind of took my eye mask off and I just looked up at her and I was like, "Thanks for being there." And she's like,
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, thanks for asking." So it was just a kind of like, yeah, there are things that, like those dumb doctors that you initially went to that were like,
Yeah.
"You're fine," you know.
Really?
And I've said this a million
Yeah.
times, and I'm not a doctor, and I don't mean this against SSRIs or whatever. No one has a breakthrough, profound, transformational moment
Yeah.
on Lexapro. You know what
Nope.
I mean? Like
Nope.
no one's
The
taking a
opposite.
Zoloft.
Yeah.
But what it sometimes will do, and I'm a testament to this, is that it sometimes keeps you from, it's lane assist. That's all. Tune in next week for part 2 here on Comes a Time.